Good evening, everyone. My name is John Taves, and I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that McNally Robinson Booksellers is located in Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. We are here tonight, gathered in this space and gathered virtually, to celebrate the launch of Briar Cottage, My Summers in a Town Called Gimli by Joe Mackintosh. Thank you all so very much for joining us here in person and virtually. You will notice if you are joining us on YouTube, as I turn toward the camera, that there is a live chat available. So if you have any questions for Joe over the course of the evening or would like to offer any comments, please feel free to do so. And we'll be checking and can put those questions to Joe later on. You will notice that while you're in this space, we just ask you all to wear your masks. Anybody who comes up behind this microphone will remove theirs to speak. Once we move along to the signing portion at the end of the evening, which will take place right beside our cash desk, at that point, masks will not be obligatory, but they will be recommended. During the signing, just at the end of the event, we'll ask you all to remain seated for one moment while we move Joe along to that table. Once he's safely situated, you'll be able to come down and get all the copies of your book signed. And I'll have some incredibly exciting details about book signing procedure at the end of the event. It's such a pleasure to work with Joe. This is the third time we've launched a book for him here at the store, and it's always such a delight to spend some time planning and scheming with him, and always so great to see the end project. This is Briar Cottage, a non-fiction account of his experiences spending childhood summers at the cottage in Gimli between the years of 43 and 58, written with great humor and affection. It's a memoir that brings a bygone era to life. The book is intended, obviously, for permanent and summer residents of the town, friends of the author, and all those who want to learn about the past in Gimli. This is Joe's third book. His first, Andy Desjardins, The Life and Music of an Old-Time Fiddler, was published in 2010, and his second biography, Chris McCubbin's Running the Distance, came to our store in 2013. Joe and his wife Carol live just north of the town of Gimli, on the shores of Lake Winnipeg. Please join me in welcoming Joe Mackintosh.
Thank you kindly, John, for those words. I think it was actually in Gimli in 1941, but I didn't remember anything that year. I was born that year, so but it was always around 43, 44 that I woke up, and then by 47, 48, I had memories, and so lots of good times in Gimli. It's so good to see you all here tonight. So many old friends. It's enough to make me write another book. Not that I'm running out of time, but imagine there's people in the audience that they knew I was writing, and I guess I started back in 2016 probably, and it's taken a few years, but the end product, you know, it's really good. So. Okay, that's enough of the sales pitch. I wanted to start off by saying a few words about Gimli itself and some of the landmarks and some of the things I did to do the research in the book, really. I was very fortunate to meet people in Gimli that were around in the 50s. That's most of my good memories are in that time frame. So they were happy to sit down. They worked in stores in Gimli and had lots of information. So I thought I'd just go over a couple of the key places, and there's lots of people here tonight that have been there and they know these spots. If you're ever in Gimli in the old days, you probably shopped at Central Bakery, which was right on the corner of Center Street and 3rd Avenue. And I was able to locate one of the owners, Dorothy Volgertson, and her dad started it in 1945. They had great buttered tarts, and pies, and people used to come from Gimli and buy bread and all that kind of stuff. But one of the interesting things was the innovation. You know, we think of high tech today as being connected to the internet and all those other things. But the high tech for them was a mechanical, electrical technology, something that my friend Ken Holland would know all about. They were rotating ovens, and they were one of the first in Canada to put a oven in the bakery. And the oven would do 360 loaves of bread in one batch. And on the busy times at the store, they would do 3 batches a day. So rye bread, Irish, and all those other good things. So it's an interesting piece of history that most people wouldn't realize. The other landmark in Gimli that's gone now is the old Cpr Station, which was on the corner of Center Street and the highway, number 9 highway. And wasn't so much the station, but it was connected with the water tower. Those are the days when we had steam engines. And I discovered that the water for the tower was driven from a windmill at the lake, which was pretty innovative in those days. And of course, my brother's here, he would remember that because he's older than me, but I don't remember the windmill. Well, maybe you don't either. But anyways, and the other thing with the rail station was that they had a rail line right down Center Street to the harbor. And that line, well, it was connected with the station, of course, but they put a car there at Armstrong Fisheries, and they'd load the fish right onto the car, and the fish then would go south to New York City and other spots. So fish in those days was a really booming business for Armstrong. And then closer to my heart were some of the local restaurants on the main street. Sam's Gimli Cafe was there. He immigrated from China, and I was able to interview Mabel Tingley, who told me all about working at the store. She worked there when I think she was probably her first job. She was around 15 or 16. And just the challenges that she had. And I talk about that in the book. It's kind of it's an interesting piece. I noticed my friend Ken Schoberg's here. He and I taught at the college for years, and we'd always say, well, that's really interesting. And we would say, well, I think we'll be the judge of that. So you'll be the judge of the interest there. But the challenges that Mabel had communicating with the cook, you know, the cook spoke only Chinese, and so she was coached by Sam in terms of this is what this means, and it took a while to get, you know, this dish is one thing and that dish is another, and a real challenge. And also, she was an observer of the kind of abuse that Sam experienced as a Chinese Canadian in those days. And so it was really a hard time, but he was really good. I remember him as a really good guy. He was really nice to any of the kids that came around. He put a water fountain up front, and we used to go after swimming. We'd go and play pinball in the store. And the only thing he got a little upset with is if we tilted the machine. And he just don't tilt the machine, I throw you out. So He was a good guy. Farther down the street was the Falcon Cafe. Some of you might have known that. Donna Goodman's nodding her head. Donna Tonkin. Some of you would know Jack Tonkin. That's Jack's sister. They had a cottage right behind us. And she and my sister would remember the Falcon Cafe. Jack and I, he was very much a part of my adventures, and I talk about Jack in the book. And of course, my sister, Mari and Donna, they created their own mischief and trying out smoking in the back house. You can see the smoke coming out. No, we're not smoking. Okay, I won't tell you more details. But the Falcon Cafe was a neat spot too. I was able to track down somebody who worked as a waitress there, and she says her biggest memory was anytime she hears a Patty Page tune, it takes her back to the Falcon Cafe. They had a Wurlitzer machine, and there were these little ways you could play a tune right at your seat. And so if you sat there all night and plugged in the nickels, you get See You Later Alligator and all those neat tunes of those days. She also reminded me that Cease Looning was a milkman from Selkirk. I think Jack Wells used to refer to him as the Selkirk milkman. And he would come in and deliver the dairy products, and afterwards she'd make Cease a sundae. And she said one day she made a sundae and she put 2 cherries on it instead of 1, and the owner had to reprimand her about it. Said, no, can't make a profit at 2 cherries, only 1. So, anyways, a little tidbit of information on the Falcon Cafe. There was another store right on the corner. It was called the Lakeside Trading, and it was right across from Turgeson's. Turgeson's is a store that, if you still went to Gimli, you'd probably visit, because it's a wonderful shop, and it's a boutique now. But when I was in Gimli, I remember it's the first place I'd ever had an ice cream float. My dad took me there, and there was a soda fountain and a bar there, soda bar. And pretty exciting. If you ever go in there now, check the front desk, and there's an old cash register, which really is old. It's 1900, so it's the original cash register from the store. Now I got to check my notes to see where I am here. Okay, that's it. That's all over. Oh, I got one more here. The air base, yeah. The air base was in Gimli. In my day, it was training NATO pilots, but it was there prior to that as a World War II base. And Mabel Tingley, the woman I was talking about, her future husband walked in the Sands Cafe one day and wondered if he could walk her home. And she had to think about it, but when he came back, she said yes, and they've evidently been married for 70 years now, so that worked out nicely for Mabel. But the air base, a lot of the women in Gimli married airmen, and a fair number of the guys married the daughters of air personnel at the base. And I was wondering, I always thought there was a little bit of tension between the town and the base in those days. Maybe some of the guys were thinking, well, here they are coming in and stealing all our eligible women. That was not the feeling from the people I talked to. The base and the town were really unified, and the base provided a lot of sports activities and other things for the town. So it was a good match. There's a question of why Gimli. My dad was a machinist in the railway, And of course, he had a pass. So in the 20s, he came down to Gimli to the tourist camp, which was a set of cabins and sleeping quarters and probably tenting arrangements too. So he stayed there, and a few years later, property came across the street for sale, and he was able to purchase it. So he was there in the early 20s at the tourist camp, and he purchased that property in the 30s. And yeah, I'm glad he did. It's a wonderful spot. When did this happen? In terms of the story, it's really in three parts. I wanted to get right into the action of why I was writing it in the very beginning. So the very first section is on, I visit in my mind. It's a virtual visit because on the property now there's 2 permanent houses. So I want to, in my mind, I was on the property, and then I just started going over the property, and then the memories really did flow quite nicely, describing the kind of things we did. And I was fortunate enough to chum with a lot of Gimli kids, and so I was able to remember a lot of that and put it down. And even today, there's a number of people in Gimli that I chummed with, and they're still there. And for the most part, they're still thinking straight. So that's kind of nice at our age. The second part is really a history of the family. And my dad came from Scotland. He had served in the First World War in 1918. He did cleanup duty after the war, 1919, 1920. He came back to Scotland, and he was a journeyman machinist, but he couldn't get work in those early 20s. So in 1923, he and a chum came to Canada and settled here. He went back for a trip in 1928 to see his parents, and went out for lunch up to a place called Lossy Ruth, and he met my mother. And so for the next few years, he was trying to convince her to come out. You know, Canada's a great place. And she said, well, I'm gonna have to think of that. She was the daughter of a gameskeeper in Scotland. But by 1930, she decided to come and took the boat, landed in Quebec City. Dad went down there by train. They got married as soon as she got off the boat. Enough people together to act as a judge and witnesses. And of course, Dad took a pass down with them because now they're married. Free trip back. Tricky little Scottish trick. So that worked out. Yeah. I was going to say something about 1950. That really stands out in my memory because we got off school. My sister and I were off school in May, early May, and we spent the whole summer at Gimli. And unfortunately, Ort was commandeered to Sandbag, so he wasn't there. But sorry about that. Yeah. Later on in my junior high years, I worked hard during the year. Good thing there's no one here from my junior high years. But the reason was, in those days, you used to get exemptions if you did well throughout the year. So grade 7 and 8, that's what I got. I got exemptions. Finally, I didn't have to write the final exams. So we were down in Gimli in mid-June, I think. And so I would wander over to the school and wait for some of my chums to come out. And here I was, the only guy that was free in the playground, and guys inside were probably thinking, why did you get out of here? But, and that was a fun time. We would be there through July and August, right through to September, long weekend, and then come back. And we had this little dog, Spotty, and Spotty he didn't want to go home. He was like me, and he'd crawl under the cottage. And I felt like crawling under too, because it was such a great time being there for such a long time in the summer. Just going to say a few words about the cover of the book. The top part is a picture taken on the breakwater in Gimli, and that's looking towards South Beach and Willow Island. It's a sunny day. It's calm water. It's just a perfect day of summer. And I actually took the picture last year, 6 a.m, and it reflects the happy days of the cottage, the happy times we had. The bottom picture is taken at the harbor, and the interesting part is the roiling waves on the left-hand side, on the north side of the pier. It's such a contrast, but that's really the lake as we know it. It can get up really fast, and it's a very dangerous lake. And you look at the harbor in the middle, and there's nothing happening. It's calm as ever. But the picture does reflect the sadder times, the times that every family has. And so there is a section in that middle part on the happy times and the sad times of the family. So the very last section in the book is really a walk around Gimli. So I take a tour of Gimli and the landmarks that I remember, and who was there and what was there, and the movie theater and those kinds of things. So that's the way the book works. Yeah. Well, just one other thing, my sister and brother helped a lot in terms of putting the book together. Ord was great in terms of editing and keeping me on track in terms of what happened in the 30s, 40s. My sister, I convinced her to write a few pieces, and they're in the book. She's a wonderful writer. I was worried that she'd eclipse me in my writing. And of course she did, but I put it in anyways. And she talks about, one of the stories is talking about dancing at the pavilion, which is another landmark in Gimli. And she talks about the dance itself, the euphoria of being there, watching the dancers, all the good-looking guys that were there. And my story a little earlier was kind of riding the bike up. I rode my bike up. I was about 12 years old. And we'd hop off the bike and jump up on the lip of the pavilion and kind of look in the screen. And I was interested in who was playing as a musician. I thought, oh, that's kind of neat, early on. The men of note were playing, and they were playing Latin American tunes and polka, the odd polka, very few. But you had to play a polka if you're a musician in Manitoba. And foxtrots. And so years later, when in my experiences playing in bands and dance bands and big band, I ran across 2 musicians that were in the Men of Note when I was watching them. Glenn Thorstensen, sax player, he was part of it, and Nestor Mudry, who played trumpet. Nestor just died a few years back. He was 101, and It's one of my regrets. I didn't get this book on the market fast enough because he was always asking me, Joey, when you get that book up, I want to hear it, see it. But they used to go out to the dances Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. They would drive out, and after the gig was over, they'd drive back into Winnipeg. And both of them were engineers, and they had responsible jobs, day jobs. But imagine that, that's an hour there and an hour back, and that's a lot of driving. Unless you're somebody like Jim who likes to drive a lot. I think that's probably enough. I'm just going to read a few passages. I call it the magic of Gimli. Everything that I was writing about kind of struck a chord, and I thought it was wonderful. I'll talk a little bit, I'll read a little piece on the cottage itself and where it was. The cottage, nestled in the trees of the inside lot, was a Spartan paradise. There were few amenities. The building was a simple, uninsulated wood frame structure. There was an outhouse, and we used a cement bunker-like cooler adjacent to the cottage for milk and butter. Mum did all the cooking on a monster wood-burning stove, acting also to heat the cottage in cooler days. Our lot next door on the corner, we had two lots, so the one on the corner had fewer trees, so it was used for tossing footballs, kicking soccer balls, batting baseballs, and chipping golf balls. I dug in a Campbell's soup can so my friend and I could have a chip and putt game without the putter. My sister was unintentionally batted in one of our baseball games. That caused a furor of excitement. A call to Dr. Johnson and a trip to the Johnson Memorial Hospital for x-rays. You can read Marie's little story in the book on the rest of that part. It was also common for people to collect rainwater. Dad erected 2 large barrels for water storage. Next to that, he built a small outdoor washstand with a mirror attached to the house. To give some feeling of comfort, he printed hot on one of the barrels and cold on the other. Of course, it was an illusion, but it worked. There were no complaints about the temperature of the washing water. The other piece that was wonderful in those days, we used to take the train down, and just watching the operation of the steam engine, a bit of a marvel. Rail was the way many cottagers got from Winnipeg to Gimli and back, at least until 1957. There was a magical quality to that experience. The coal-fired engine sat like a nervous racehorse, frothing steam, eager to get going. The locomotive provided its own mechanical mystique. The sight of the wisps of smoke, the smell of the burning coal, the sound of the haunting horn, people milling about the station. Many were Canadian Pacific Railway workers with passes. They were fair weather migrants from the big city, eager to soak up the light and heat of summer along the beaches of Lake Winnipeg. The steam engine was slow to get up to speed. There was both an engineer and a fireman in the cab. The fireman's primary job was to feed the fire with coal. Unlike the steady acceleration of a diesel engine, the steam engine would lurch for the first few yards, jolting unevenly until the flow of steam steadied. But as the locomotive got up to speed, as the fireman shoveled more coal, there was the gentle rocking of the cars, the steady beat of the engine, and the clacking of the rails. The hydro pole sped by, the window was open, and there was the great smell of coal, burning as the steamy smoke floated by. It was always fun to have your head out, but that was short-lived, as my dad reminded us of the danger of getting a cinder in our eye. Yes, tickets please. The train conductor, the man with the golden stripe in his cap, as opposed to the white stripe of the trainman, arrived to punch a hole in our passes and place a little tag on the window. Next was the newsie with his standard calls, cigarettes, cigars, and chocolate bars, Cracker Jack, chewing gum, and candy. I don't think we bought any of that stuff. My mom would take along some scones and maybe some oatcakes. We'd have that as a snack. But it was nice. I didn't mind it. One of the main events in the summer was attending the movies. And I would go with my friend Glenn Rudney, who lived on the corner of our street by the highway. That's now a restaurant there now. But it was a grocery store in those days. So Glenn and I would always go to the movies. But the movie itself and the theater itself was really quite the place in those days. The Rudney store was on the corner of Roddy Drive. That's what the street's called now. It didn't have a name when we were on it. And the highway. The family lived in the back of the store and operated a grocery store in the front. Glenn and I would be going to the movie theater and needed to first stock up on snacks. Glenn entered the front door of the store and hollered, "Just me." He would pick up a giant pack of sunflower seeds, a necessity, and a pop, perhaps a Winola cola or an orange crush, and some bars and candy. All the kids came with sunflower seeds and 25 cents to get in. I don't remember anyone buying from the movie confectionery. The theater was always packed. Sometimes you couldn't hear the movie for the cracking and spitting of seeds. Then a guy, never a girl, would roll an empty drink bottle down the aisle. A journey that seemed to take minutes as it clattered and banged down the concrete floor, aided by the odd kick and the accompanying chuckles and guffaws. How did anyone ever hear the soundtrack? Sometimes one of the lonely adults in our midst would complain to the owner. The movie would be stopped, and petite and stately Miss Greenberg would appear on the stage. She waited to get the attention of the yahoos and threatened to eject them if they wouldn't comply with the rules. There was reluctant silence. Then once the reel began to roll, attention to the movie was followed immediately by a resumption of the cracking of seats. It wasn't long until another bottle rolled down, followed by several more, and then God Save the Queen, which no one observed. People were exiting the side doors as if someone had yelled, "Fire!" back on the bikes for the ride home. There's just one other piece. This is the last piece I'm going to read tonight. We had good friends that lived on a farm, and the Cressucks. And Johnny was my brother's age, and Jeannie was a little older than me, but we were good playmates in those early days. And here's a little incident that, in retrospect, is quite humorous. Jeannie lived on a farm on Gimli Road. It was where I first learned that you could drink the milk directly from the cow. Her mother was milking a cow and she asked me if I wanted a drink. "Yes, please." She squeezed some into a cup and handed it to me. What a shock. It was warm. A revelation for me. So I stuck to the nice cold stuff in the store from then on. On another day, my brother Ward and Jeannie's brother Johnny decided to ride the pigs. Jeannie and I were spectators. Ward was sitting on the fence. And Johnny, still dressed in his going to church clothes, was in the pen, intent on riding. He grabbed one of the animals around the neck and leaped on. The pig was bucking and squealing, trying to shake him off. Johnny kept his grip until the pig stopped suddenly and Johnny slipped off into the mud. The sty wasn't the cleanest of rodeo sites. Johnny was now chasing the other pig when his father shouted from the door of the house, "Johnny, get out of there." That's probably edited. There's other words. There was one summer when I was keen to test my strength. It was 1952, the summer after I'd completed the 5th grade. I'd grown in height now, almost as tall as my friend Jeannie. I played sports and figured I was ready to take on the world. She and I had raced, biked, swam, and played red light, green light, Mother May I, knock off Ginger. I wondered if she wanted to try wrestling. I'm sure she was confused. She lived on a farm, hoisting pails of milk and bales of hay, and probably knew down deep that this would be a short match. I knew that girls didn't wrestle. At least they didn't back in the 50s. I hadn't seen any on CBC's Saturday Night Wrestling. I figured it would be an opportunity to try out a little trick that I'd learned. During school recess, my friend Gavin and I would fight for fun. Boxing and wrestling. It was a typical boys' contest. Even though the sparring was play, there was a deeper motive. In the pecking order of guys, our school chums, we were trying to figure out who was tougher, Gavin or me. Here was an opportunity for me to try out a few of my fighting moves. To be fair, I described the maneuver to Jeannie. I said, Jeannie, if you're lying on your back and your opponent is sitting on your stomach, pinning your hands behind your head, I know how to get free. She said, you do? How does that work? I said, easy, just tighten your... Thank you. I said, just tighten your stomach muscles and then flip up your body. Surprise is the key. Jeannie took off her jacket and said, let's try it. Get on your back. Whoa, not so fast, Jeannie. First you have to get me on my back. Then you have to hold me down. That's the hard part. I'm not going to just let you get me down. Now, Jeannie was taller than me, but I figured because she was a girl, I would automatically have an advantage. That's probably why I challenged her with such confidence. Anyway, I'd spent a winter sparring with Gavin. Sounds good, said Jeannie, let's go. Well, instantly, she had her right arm around my back and her right leg across my legs. Then she torqued me, and I was off my feet and immediately on my back on the ground. It happened so suddenly that I didn't have time to react. It just took seconds. She must have been wrestling the pigs on the farm. Now she was sitting on my stomach and had my hands pinned behind my head. I was hoping my mom or dad or my sister or my brother hadn't seen this happen. It was embarrassing. Boys are supposed to be stronger. Jeannie was tough. So now try your move. Show me how it works, said Jeannie, leaning in close and whispering. I had already tried it and I couldn't budge her. Absolutely no movement. I shouldn't have tipped her off about the move. I tried it again, nothing. Joe, why don't you try the move that your friend showed you? What could I say? I'd already tried it, nothing happened. There was so little reaction that Jeannie didn't even know I tried it. I waited, I gave a mighty heft to my bum, again, nothing, couldn't budge Jeannie. Okay, let's get up, I said. Oh, no way, said Jeannie. She was having too much fun. No wonder she liked wrestling, she was good at it. You gonna say uncle? Or are you gonna try that half-assed move again? Well, I sure as hell was gonna say uncle eventually. But lying here wasn't such a bad option. And anyways, she was in control. I would get up when she let me up. Now, perhaps Jeannie's hormones were firing a little bit. Mine weren't, not yet. Give me time, a little more testosterone in the veins. My body was just beginning to enjoy the soft and cuddly comfort of the opposite sex. But my mind was still focused on getting on with all the cool things that could be happening. Throwing a ball, kicking a ball, catching a ball, hitting a ball, dribbling a ball. Summers get any better, ever? And then, to my rescue, my pal Jack from across the lane was beside us. Jeannie got off me slowly, hopped on her bike and rode away, savoring her victory. You okay, Joe? Said Jack. That was Jack Tonkin, Donna's brother, my neighbor, fellow camper, longtime friend. He stayed at his grandpa McGregor's cottage across the lane on the corner of 6th Avenue. There was silence. I was feeling lousy from my wrestling defeat, but I sure as hell wasn't telling him. What kind of game you guys playing, says Jack. Well, I was showing Jeannie some defensive moves, like how to get out of a wrestling hold when someone's pinning you down. Silence. Jack says, I think she just put you in a piss. I said, I didn't say anything. I just said, you feel like tossing the football? We got up, did that. So that's it. Are there any questions, John?
So if anybody does have any questions, I have this microphone right now. I'll just ask you to ask me the question so I can then repeat it into the microphone for the benefit of all those watching. And if you are watching at home and have a question, please feel free to write the question just in the chat on the YouTube stream, and we can get to you as well. If you do have any comments for Joe, rest assured that I probably cannot do justice to your eloquence, but there'll be ample time to speak to him at the signing table after the event. Were there any questions? Okay, no interrogation.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. It was such a pleasure to host you here for your latest book. We'll now move along to the signing portion of the evening. So in just a moment, we'll relocate Joe just beside the cash desk. After that point, once he's settled, please feel free to come up and have a copy of the book signed. We have copies of the book available at our cash desk or at the signing table. You can get a copy of the book signed before you pay for it. Just please do pay for the book at some point tonight. And thank you all so very much for joining us. Please give a rousing round of applause to Joe.